By this point, the lines have been drawn, and it seems as if there may be no end in sight, at least for the near future, for this government shutdown. That's not only the general consensus, that seems to be the attitude many leaders in Congress are taking as well. To find out the latest and where things currently stand, we welcome back WTOP Capitol Hill correspondent Mitchell Miller. Mitchell, what's going on?
Good to be with you.
Yeah, so that greeting was also going to be my first question. What is going on? What is the latest? Where do we stand shutdown-wise? As I mentioned in the intro, there doesn't seem to be any light at the end of the tunnel as of yet. Do I have that correct?
You do, unfortunately. Both sides, pick your metaphor. They are dug in as deeply as they've ever been. Now, 20 days into this government shutdown. And the headline, I believe, today is the fact that Senate Majority Leader John Thune is going to bring up legislation that would effectively pay the military through the shutdown, a single measure that would be voted up or down by the Senate. And this is designed, of course, to put pressure on Democrats who will have to go on the record as to whether or not they would be in favor of paying the military during the shutdown. Of course, last week, Democrats voted against a defense appropriations bill that would have covered the entire coming year. That includes, of course, military pay as well as a military pay increase. Senate Democrats decided to block that in the midst of all of this shutdown back and forth. So, again, this is another effort that Senate Majority Leader John Thune is trying to apply some kind of heat on Democrats to get something to budge, because clearly nothing has budged over the last few weeks. You've had 10 votes in the Senate, as you know, go up or down, and they couldn't get the 60 votes, and no votes changed at all during that entire period. So this will be yet another attempt to try to move something along these lines this week.
Yeah, and I'm not going to ask you to speculate because obviously you're not an elected representative, but is military pay, that seems to be the last hope that the Republican side of the Hill is just trying to utilize to try and, like you said, get them to actually buck. But is that going to work? I mean, they've already voted down the defense appropriation bill. You know, I don't think that many that are in support of this stronghold that the Democrats have are really going to be wary of military pay being on the table when, you know, there is such an important issue that they find at hand. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think that the Democrats are really unified this time around. They've broken apart, as you know, in past shutdown showdowns, most notably, of course, in March. But I think when you talk to Democratic lawmakers, they say, look, all these things happened since the start of the year. And of course, you all have been covering this extensively about the number of layoffs, starting with Doge and everything that's happened. And Democrats feel like if they have to give in on one thing, then they should have been fighting all these other battles long before this. So I think the Republicans, it's a smart move. It's to go after military pay. This is something that concerns members of both sides of the aisle, obviously. And in fact, you could see last week there was a building effort by the GOP to do this, not only with the defense appropriations bill, but also on Friday there was a news conference where they brought in House Armed Services Committee Chair Mike Rogers, who noted the variety of pain that is inflicted on military personnel, the fact that most military families don't have a lot of savings. They have to go paycheck to paycheck, that it is only 1 in 5 of the military families actually have 2 incomes. So this is something that puts a lot of strain on military families. And then in addition to all that, Mike Rogers pointed out that the organization that essentially manages the nuclear stockpile for the United States is running out of money itself, and that it's going to have to lay off about 80% of its personnel. So this is another pressure point that they think that something might happen. However, as we recall, the initial pressure point was thought to be on October 15th, but then President Trump stepped in and directed the Pentagon to move around that money. However, now Republicans are saying that may not necessarily be able to happen again, and that's why they're zeroing in on this.
We're talking here with the WTOP Capitol Hill correspondent Mitchell Miller. Yeah, on that move to direct defense funds to cover basically the military's what would have been their first missed paycheck. I saw that some Senate Republicans weren't necessarily happy about that move either, because that just means that you're taking money from other critical programs, like you mentioned, the nuclear stockpile, and moving it to moving it to actually pay the people that are doing the job, but there may not be money for the programs that they're in. Did you hear any pushback from even within the president's own party for that move?
Well, I think what you're seeing is what has happened a lot with Republicans, both in the Senate and the House, but particularly in the Senate. These are people that are very serious about the appropriations process, and they know that this is really unprecedented, that you're grabbing money from one pot to pay for another. And so it's a lot of private discussions about this and concerns raised about this. Again, this ongoing issue is how relevant is Congress at this point if the president can always do something from the executive branch to kind of override whatever Congress is doing in terms of appropriations. So there is definitely some concern about that. But the issue now, because we're in the middle of this standoff and nobody wants to really anger anybody or upset anybody, particularly in the military, is that they don't, either on the Democratic or the Republican side, they don't want to shake things up and say, wait a second, no, we're going to, file another case in court that says this is illegal. So everybody has, at least on that first round, allowed this to go through. Now, if that were to continue, I think then you would hear voices more louder on that issue.
So what do you do when you're surrounded by uncertainty? You look back to things that you do know about, which is history. From a historical standpoint, we're coming up on this being among the top echelon of the longest government shutdowns. You've been through many before. What's different about this one and what's similar, and, any sort of historical perspective that you can provide would be greatly appreciated here, Mitchell.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, we know that this is going to, this week, become the second longest government shutdown ever. It's going to surpass that infamous 1995-96 back and forth between Newt Gingrich and then President Clinton. And that was really one of the early templates, if you will, that really shook up Washington at that time. Even though there had been some shutdowns before under the Carter administration, that was really the explosive one. And then we saw that there were political implications from that Newt Gingrich thought that was going to be a political winner, and it turned out to actually eventually bolster the Clinton administration and potentially helped President Clinton get elected. What's different now, however, is the partisan atmosphere, as you well know, is so much more severe than it was even then. It's almost quaint to look back in the mid-1990s to think of what it was now. Now it is all about your side winning, even though Democratic and Republican leaders say publicly that it's not about that it's about the American people. Ultimately, that's why these sides are so dug in, and why I think this is going to continue and probably be the longest government shutdown ever. Of course, the first term of President Trump, we had the one that went 34 days, and ultimately President Trump decided that he would essentially fold his tent and give in on the border wall money. However, at this point, the president has shown no indication at all of stepping in, and yet many lawmakers on both sides of the aisle feel that ultimately, of course, that it is going to be President Trump that is going to have to figure out how this is going to end. And of course, he wants to end it on his terms and Republicans' terms. Democrats are the agitator, if you will, in this case. So they're in a more difficult situation, I would say, sort of like 2013, if you go back with the Republicans, who ironically were trying to take away the Affordable Care Act. They were the ones that eventually backed down after that. So it's usually the party, whether it's Republican or Democrat, that's trying to push for some specific goal is the one that somehow has to back off a little bit at the end of the day.
Anyone who says they know how this is going to turn out is definitely lying, and we can trust on you to keep an eye on things for us. WTOP Capitol Hill correspondent Mitchell Miller, thank you for the update.
You bet.
And you can find this interview on our website and keep abreast of all of Mitchell's reporting at federalnewsnetwork.com and WTOP.com.